Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our panel tonight. My name is Ben Roth, and I'm a faculty member at the College of Social Work. It's a privilege for me tonight to be with you and with a panel of Latinx leaders from across the state who I'm really eager to introduce you to. Before we begin, just a few things. First of all, throughout the panel, you have a chance to post questions and answers. There's a live Q&A. There's a question mark, or there's a call-out bubble with a question mark in it. Feel free to post questions, and I will be collecting those throughout our conversation. And when we have a chance, we will pose those to the panelists. We really want this to be a conversation with you and a chance to address your questions to the extent that we can. I want to give a special thanks to the Newman Institute for Peace and Social Justice for helping to sponsor this event. The Newman Institute here at the College of Social Work does a number of things throughout the year. One of them is a fall lecture that they have on Monday, November 15th, featuring Bernie Mazak on the topic of economic development. I'm happy to share with you more about that. There's also lots of stuff going around in the state. The Centro Latino that's up at USC Upstate has some exciting events coming up, including a Latinx Student Summit that's being run by the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. I assume that one of our panelists tonight, Yvonne, may talk a little bit more about that event. And I want to recognize other people. There's so many people who could be on this call, panelists who, in addition to the esteemed folks who are joining us tonight, are just doing amazing work, including Julio Hernandez up at Clemson, folks down in the Low Country and in Charleston, their organizations there and across the state, really led by members of the Latinx community that are really doing important work, and I just a shout out to them. I also want to thank Victoria Montgomery from the College of Social Work for her work putting this together, and Michelle Crisp and her team for managing the technology tonight. So let's get started. For the last decade, a common observation has been in South Carolina has been that the Latinx community is growing fast, and this is true. That was the case when I first moved here in 2013. In fact, it's more than tripled since the year 2000, and there are now over 350,000 Latinos and Latinas across the state. Many members of the Latinx community are immigrants, and of these, some are new arrivals. But it's also the case that the Latinx community is extremely established. In fact, well over half of Latinos in the state, 57%, were born in the United States. They're business owners, government officials, community leaders. They're valedictorians, lawyers, and doctors. They're also incredibly diverse, a cross-section of Latin America representing dozens of countries, languages, cultures. And this kind of diversity and leadership is also present among the Latinx youth in our state. Though the South Carolina that they are growing up in and coming of age in is very different than the South Carolina of 20 years ago. So today's panel aims to engage 4 Latinx leaders who have helped make South Carolina what it is today. And I've had the honor of getting to know each of them over the years, and find them just to be people who are personally engaging and professionally doing work that I have deep respect for and continue to learn from and gain inspiration from. So our discussion tonight will hopefully mark some of the wins that they've had as leaders, demonstrating the power and influence of the Latinx community to affect change within our state. But we also want to talk about how the ongoing challenges that some members of the Latinx community continue to face in different parts of our state and institutions of which they're a part. These are challenges like equity in schools and access to healthcare, housing discrimination, and neighborhood violence and quality. The Charleston County School District, for example, recently settled with the Justice Department to resolve an investigation into complaints that the school district failed to communicate essential information to thousands of Spanish-speaking parents and DACA recipients in our state aren't eligible for in-state tuition at state universities like Clemson or U of SC, and they can't access state scholarships even if they graduate from a South Carolina high school. So there remain significant obstacles to Latinx youth, and this is a call both for the panelists, who you're going to hear from shortly, to continue to engage in the important work that they're doing, but also to have a forward mindset, thinking about cultivating tomorrow's leaders. So let me quickly introduce our the panelists. Adela Mendoza is the director of the Hispanic Alliance, an organization in Greenville. That is a critical bridge that connects people, organizations, and resources. The Hispanic Alliance has 4 community teams comprised of local leaders and experts. These teams address key challenges facing the Latinx community in the areas of education, financial stability, health, and legal justice. But the Hispanic Alliance also runs a youth development program called the Student Dreamers Alliance, which I'm hoping that Adela will talk a little bit more about today. Eileen Gomez is also with us. She graduated recently from Columbia College and was previously an organizer with Apple Legal Justice, where she worked with DACA United, an activist group here in the state. She now works as a paralegal for a law firm in West Columbia. And Ivan Segura is the program manager for the Hispanic Latino Affairs Division at the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Just a quick shout out, he was recently recognized by the Mexican government for his years of service to the Latino community. And I'm assuming that many people on the call saw this and smiled, knowing how much he deserved it, and also appreciating the fact that he gets many of these kinds of awards. And if he doesn't, he deserves them because he wears many hats as a leader, including his tireless effort to support Latinx artists and activists across the state through the organization Palmetto Luna. So unable to join us tonight is Diana Pliego. Unfortunately, she grew up in South Carolina and attended Columbia College, now lives in DC and works as a policy associate for the National Immigration Law Center. I'm really happy to see that Ilcia Muñiz is also on the call with us. We were having some technical difficulties. Ilcia, hi, welcome. Ilcia is a graduate of Clemson University and a longtime advocate for the Latinx community. She was previously in the field of child welfare in Greenville County and is now a DOJ accredited representative, or I believe at least on the way to becoming a DOJ accredited representative at a law firm in the upstate. So let me ask in this order if Adela and Eileen, Ilcia, and Ivan, if each of you can tell us a little bit about who you are and maybe some lessons that you've learned as a leader in the respective fields where you've worked. Adela, do you want to get us started?
You will not, but by now I should not mute myself. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'll be happy to get us started. So first of all, it's just such a pleasure to have this space with leaders that I respect so much. And it just makes my heart really, really full when I think about the growing leadership in the Hispanic community. It hasn't been like this all the time. You know, I'm an immigrant as well. I've been in South Carolina almost 15 years now. And it's just so exciting to see the evolution of our community and the evolution of leadership. So just wanted to say that. And thank you for bringing us together. But yeah, so the Hispanic Alliance is, I like to say that we, you know, now collective impact is very well known, but the Hispanic Alliance is truly a collective impact network. And we were that before we had the language to describe who we were and what we wanted to do. But so on the most basic sense of our work, we provide resources and increase access to resources for the Hispanic community. But over the years, our work has evolved to creating bridges to opportunity for this community. And that has to do with obviously developing Hispanic leadership. And now I think later we'll touch on the acceleration of young Hispanic leaders who have great potential, but may be facing barriers to success. And our job, as I see it as leaders, as Hispanic Alliance, as a network, is to ensure that our kids can fly free of those challenges and those barriers, that our kids can go wherever they want to go, that if they choose to remain in South Carolina, that they have the opportunity to thrive. And so the Hispanic Alliance creates this ecosystem of opportunity by increasing access for students and their families to education, health, financial stability, and legal services. And our approach has been very holistic for many years because we understand that no matter how brilliant a student is, if he or she is having trouble at home, it's going to be very difficult to dream beyond the limitations that they perceive. And so the Student Dreamers Alliance, which is the Youth Accelerator Program, really is a fairly new initiative. And Ben, you have been part of that. So later I may turn the tables and ask you questions about it. And but you've been very generous, like many others in South Carolina, to just pull together resources. And so I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned doing this work is that resources will always follow good work. And I really believe that with all my heart. I think that for me, you know, growing up in Mexico and having a very different experience with systems, with government, I had a tendency to think of the resources available before I could approach the work. And I think it's when I was able to shift that perspective and understand that unless we start the work, we're never going to get there. And the Hispanic Alliance has been very blessed to get a lot of people come up to us and say, you know, you're doing good work. How can I help you? And sometimes that is a financial gift, but very often it is opening doors for our kids. And I believe that's what everyone in this panel is doing, opening doors of opportunity for our kids to get through those, to build bridges for the next generation.
Go ahead, Eileen.
I'm waiting for my thing. Okay, there it goes. It wouldn't unmute. Been having problems with my microphone. But anyways, everybody, my name is Eileen Gomez. As Ben said, I recently graduated from Columbia College. I grew up in the very small town of Anderson, South Carolina, and I am a DACA recipient. Growing up in Anderson, it's a very rural town, so there wasn't a lot of resources available to me. And then also being first generation immigrant, child of immigrants, I had no idea what I was going up against whenever I was applying to college, let alone the obstacles that DACA recipients face in the state. And a lot of them are, like, for example, DACA recipients don't have access to in-state tuition, the merit-based scholarships, or professional licensing in the state, which is something I faced considering I wanted to go into the medical field. But unfortunately, like, that couldn't happen. And my dream school was Clemson, but of course it was too expensive. So I had to change my route, and that's how I ended up in Columbia at Columbia College. But it was honestly probably the best decision of my life, because when I moved to Columbia, I found a wonderful group of people, and they are part of DACA United SC. DACA United SC is an advocacy group. We advocate for DACA recipients and immigrant rights all over the state. Most of us are based in Columbia, but we have members all over the state, and we work with everybody all over the state. I'm very thankful to be a part of that group. We've been able to help people with their DACA renewal applications, and for the brief period of time that first-time applications were open, we were also able to walk people through that process. So it's just giving back to my community is just, and having that support is just very, I'm very grateful for that. One of the biggest lessons I have learned as with the work that I do is that change doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes, I'm not trying to be pessimistic or anything, but there's times where you feel like you're going like 3 steps back every time you take a step forward. But it's those small steps and the people that you continue to work with and that support you that make the biggest difference. Another thing that I really, really value is Latinx leaders in South Carolina are really something special, because as Latinx, we face a lot of barriers in the state, but we're still here, we're present, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And it's the leaders that came before us and that will come after us that motivate me to keep going and to push for a change in South Carolina, because it has taken a long time, but there is change happening. And I'm really excited to see what future Latinx leaders will do for South Carolina.
Thanks, Eileen. What about you, Ilcia?
Am I unmuted now? Okay. Yes. So my name is Ilcia, and I currently work at Immigrant Connection, where we provide church-based immigration legal services to people that cannot afford an attorney. So we try to work with under-resourced communities, and we do that because we believe that God loves immigrants, and we feel called to help people with their immigration paperwork. And so I feel very honored and privileged to be able to help people with something that I know is so important to them. And so some of the lessons that I've learned as a leader is that when it comes to doing stuff that really intimidates us, I think we will never be ready. And that's one of the things that I think tends to hold us back, is sometimes we don't see the abilities or the capacity that we have as leaders. I know I personally have struggled with sometimes not feeling good enough, not feeling smart enough, not feeling financially able enough to do all these different things that I want to do. But this mindset gets in the way of what we can actually accomplish. And so I just want to say that we will never feel ready enough, and ready is right now. You have to just jump in and do what you feel called to do, even if you don't feel like you're enough or that you're ready, because chances are that you are enough, you just don't know it yet.
Thanks, Ilcia. What about you, Ivan?
Well, Ben, before everything, thank you for the opportunity of reaching out to members of our community. I guess I was thinking back in the time I moved to South Carolina about 20 years ago, so it's been a while. And I remember from the beginning, like, because people sometimes ask me, like, how do you even get started on this, like trying to help the community? And I always say, like, I got in good opportunities, and I believe as an immigrant and as a member of the Latinx community, for every opportunity that I seize, I also acquire the responsibility to help those in my community that have not been able to get that opportunity. And I used to get a lot of people telling me, like, because I was always complaining. I was the one going to the meetings, hey, what about the Hispanic community? Hey, excuse me, I mean, your budget only has 0.01% for Latinos in South Carolina. When is that going to change? Excuse me, when are you going to hire a bilingual person? And I used to get a lot of people telling me, hey, you don't like it, why don't you just leave? Because, this is the South. It's kind of like supposed to be like that. And I was like, no, I'm not only going to stay here, I'm going to make sure that this change, because change, like Ilcia and Eileen mentioned, is like, it might come slow, but what you need to do is you need to make this happen. Some of the lessons that I learned is, number one, don't wait. Now that I have this position, I keep telling people, it took me 18 years to get the job that I really love to do, which is advocating for the community. However, I've been advocating for the community for 20 years. I didn't wait. It was never my job. And I think that's the second lesson. If you're going to help the community, be genuine. Do it from your heart, and people are going to understand that. I think I was very lucky because I always said that it was an organizational ego. I wasn't doing this because I wanted to advance my career. I wasn't coming to this community or that community because that's my job. I was going there because help needed to be done, because the community needed resources. And I believe people started to understand that and just helping each other. And I think that's the silver lining that I see right now from lessons learned from the pandemic, is that everybody across the state understood that, this is about the community. We need to start working together. We need to start communicating. We need to start sharing resources. And what Ilcia just mentioned also made me think that, yeah, a lot of times we don't call ourselves a leader. I know whenever I tell people that I'm an introvert, everybody's like, really? Like, yes, I am an introvert. And it takes for me to have these meetings. And right now with this award, everybody's paying attention. I'm just like, let's just keep doing the work. Don't say anything. But a lot of times, yes, after a day like this, I just want to just go into a room, don't talk to anybody, maybe play some music. But that's also that we also have to struggle with that sometimes. We just feel like, hey, help me. Yes, we can help. But sometimes also, even when you call us a leaders, that also waits on us. But I guess you just have to continue doing it.
So let's talk a little bit about the work. And what are some wins that you've had? I know that Eileen talked a little bit about DACA United and how important that's been. Maybe you can say a little bit more about that, or other work that you've done, Eileen. And for others, and sometimes this, I get maybe it's a small win, or maybe it's a big one. But I know that sometimes those wins are what can help keep you going in positions of leadership and influence. What have been some of the wins that have been important to you? And I don't.
I'll jump in. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, just the work that we've done with DACA United is a huge win, but also I worked pretty much full time for the legislation that would allow DACA recipients, allow them the in-state tuition, the scholarships, and the professional licensing in South Carolina. I worked on that. I think it was 2019 full time, pretty much. And even though it didn't pass because COVID got in the way, and then it still hasn't passed. Just talking to people and educating people. I had the privilege of coming to speak to one of Ben's classes about the bill and the work not only that I have done, but that others have done, and just the immense support that I got, and seeing the look on people's faces when they were learning something new, because a lot of times you may hear about it, but you don't actually know what's going on with the issue. But it's just, I think putting a face to the issue really helped a lot of people, and just, I made a lot of connections, and I've also been able to just make a lot of friendships along the way through that. And I think that's really important with the type of work that we do, is not only to help the community, but also establish those lifelong friendships, because at the end of the day, we're all part of the same community, and the goal is to help each other.
Adela, what about you? Oh, sorry, I think you may be muted.
Taking forever. Okay, there it is. It's taking forever. I'm sorry, I'm not going to mute myself anymore. Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. One of them is this program that I mentioned before, which is a leadership accelerator. Started 4 years ago, probably 5 now. And initially, we knew that we wanted to lift the voices of our community, right? So we truly believe that sustainable change can only be achieved when you are elevating the voices of others. I approach this work always from the lens of, we have to step out of the way, right? I mean, sometimes you have to open the door, but we have to step out of the way. I think it is a responsibility to open doors, but it is our youth's responsibility to walk through those doors. And that sounds great as an idea, as a concept. But when just to describe very generally, so the Student Dreamers Alliance is basically an accelerator that focuses on the individual. So a lot of our students are carrying a lot of weight. They are carrying a lot of trauma. They are basically the adults in their households. And they have just so much responsibility on their shoulders. And they never really get an opportunity to voice some of that, kind of let go of that pressure that they feel. And so many years ago, in 2008, when the Illegal Immigration Reform Act passed in South Carolina, which prohibits generally an undocumented person to enroll in a public college, even if they can afford to pay for it, I think that many of us who were really committed to this work sort of just felt very defeated, because now you're building systemic walls around these kids, right? It doesn't matter how much they want it, it's just not possible. And you need to remember that, although the Hispanic community is now becoming a little more established, it took a while for people to really feel comfortable accessing systems. I mean, I still remember, at least in Greenville County School District, parents didn't go to the school because they were so afraid, because there were people who perhaps didn't understand the limitations and they will ask for an ID, etc. So there was an enormity of barriers that were already in front of these kids. And so it took a while for us to understand that the only way to change this is to start with the individual. It doesn't really matter. I mean, Ivan, myself, maybe had at some point we had to be the voice of the Hispanic community. But eventually, I think Ivan and I have had this conversation before, you have to transform that to elevating the voice of the community that is actually affected by the issue. I do believe that that's a good check for us as leaders, right? If you find yourself advocating for others, but their voices are not at the table, you are perpetuating an issue that we have not only in South Carolina, in many places, but just to focus in South Carolina, right? decisions such as that legislation that passed are happening because those voices are not at the table. The voices of the people who are going to be impacted, possibly forever, are not at the table. And those decisions happen to change the trajectory of this entire community. So for us, the win has been that now 3-4 years later, our students are about to graduate from college. And it took so much, it just gets me every time I think about it, because sometimes the work feels very heavy. And I think about it as mountains and valleys, right? And we have been in so many valleys where you really don't see the other side. And the win is to see our kids actually leading the way on the other side and telling us, no, it's this way, it's not the other way. And so every class that we have, we invite for feedback. And actually, Ben, you were part of, leading our logic model, so that, after the pilot, we were inviting the voices of our students to tell us, okay, you were the first cohort. What was your experience? What should we have done differently? What should we repeat? And I firmly believe that because those voices were at the table and they were teaching us how to help them, the second, third, and fourth class became stronger and stronger. And now we have this network of young people who are helping one another. So it's no longer an idea, it's actually a reality. And so I think that for me, that's the greatest win, that our kids are leading us.
Ivan, did you want to chime in? And I feel like you got called out there a little bit by Adela. Did you want to respond?
Yeah. I mean, I was Adela and I've been doing this for a while, and because I was mentioning something about just elevating the voices. I guess at first was creating a space or speaking on behalf, but then slowly but surely became like, well, no, you have to be the voice in here. And we had a conversation in it was always the same people back in the time. Like, okay, it's an interview, it's Adela or me, Wilfredo Leon, and then a couple people more. It's like, no, what are you calling me to speak about DACA? Let me get you a DACA student to do it. What are you calling me to speak about another issue that doesn't really involve me? Like, I'm creating those spaces where people can actually speak their voice. And also, that's the other part that I'm very proud of. One of the achievements is the mentorship. When you bring these kids and you teach them how, you understand that they may be not very good in public speaking, or they don't know how to tell their stories. Like, hey, we do have people that can teach you how to tell your story, because it's important that it's your voice, that you are the one speaking on the issue, and not me, because I have no issue, or I have no plan in speaking about younger people because I'm older. But you can do it. And also the other part is also the self-care or the mental health of these young people, because a lot of times, I mean, we ask them to speak in one time and then another time and then another time. I was thinking about Danny Trejo, Danny Flores, and he's been doing a lot of presentations, but then sometimes he had to be like, hey, you know what, I can't do anything. I'm just gonna have to step back from this. And it's a very important voice, but that also told me like, hey, you need to be having a lot more kids that can stand up. Also very important, and you mentioned it in the beginning, Ron, that Ben, that we have doctors and we have nurses, but we also have people that they just work an 8-to-5 job, and it's okay. And we also have people that all they are stay home with their kids, and that's okay. And we have people that work in construction, and that's okay. All of that are part of our community. And sometimes that's what they tell me, like, hey, I don't need to be a straight A doctoral student to be a very good member of this community. And we say, yes, you're right. And the next time we're going to bring you to talk about that, saying like how you took a class and you became a welder and you're doing okay, and you're a good model citizen, and that story also needs to be recognized.
Ilse, do you want to chime in?
Sure. I would say that, like I said earlier, I feel very privileged that I can open up some mail from immigration and see people's approval letters coming in. And that is, I have to tell you that sometimes I have to, thankfully I work at a church, and sometimes I have to walk into the sanctuary and just shed a tear or two, because it can be a lot. I think that as people of color, certain things weigh on us more, and especially when we know that person's story and we can kind of identify with it. But that is always a win for me, being able to see people getting legal status or some kind of relief. But I would also say that visibility, things like this panel where other people can see themselves in us, I think is very important. I was trying to show off to my son, trying to prove to him that I'm still cool. And I showed him the flyer of all of us that were going to be on here. And he recognized my good friend Diana and was like, oh, is that's your friend, right? And I said, yeah, that is. You remember her? And he said, she's the one that met the president, right? And I'm like, yes, she is. You remember that? And he said, yeah, I do. So it's like, well, you know, my son thinks Diana is cooler than me, but that's okay because he sees himself. He can see himself in her. He can see a success story and say, you know, my mom knows somebody that met the president. I can do that too. So I think us being able to see ourselves, because we can't become what we don't see, right? And I know that when I was young, that was something that I lacked. And I'm so happy that now it seems like we have more opportunities, and the fact that my son can have that now and come to believe that he belongs in those spaces too, I think that's so empowering.
Schools are a really important part of this story as we think about developing youth and investing in them. And yet, I think as Eileen pointed out, there are continue to be obstacles in place for some Latinx youth who may not find the kinds of supports in the kinds of schools that they attend. And I wonder if you have some thoughts on schools, their role, how you see maybe examples of local schools or universities where you're able to identify how these institutions are really investing in Latinx youth in ways that are going to help them reach their goals, maximize their potential as individuals, and investing in them as tomorrow's leaders, but also perhaps points of frustration that where you continue to see some of the same problems come about as a result of a lack of support. What do you think about schools? And I don't know, anyone can jump in, and not everyone has to take this on, but if you can maybe offer some insights here.
I'll mention something, and actually what Ilse was saying about having that role model or looking at somebody that looks like you, or having that person that went before you. And that's something like, and you, Ben, also mentioned this in the beginning, that we are organizing the first ever Latinx Student Summit later this month in USC Upstate. And one of the ideas was because we actually did a survey in the beginning. We were asking the students, like, what do you need? And of course, like, they were asking for financial aid information. They were asking to learn how to the process of going to college. But one of the questions that we were very interesting for us was that they say, we want to foster a sense of belonging. Because some of them felt like, well, I'm in this institution of higher education, but I don't feel that they are like really making me feel proud of being a Latino, that everything is the same. Of course, we found some people from smaller schools, like Andrea Flores that went to USC Sumter, that say, I never saw anybody in the school that looked like me. That's why I never feel the need to identify as Latina. But then you have good experiences like people at USC Columbia, that they have that Latin American student organization, LASO. They have one in Clemson, LUCU. And some of those places they have it, but then we still believe, we just had a presentation by Miriam Torres, Dr. Miriam Torres, and she was talking about that, the need for institutions of higher education to do better in promoting that sense of belonging for the Latinx community. And I think that's something that we still have a long way to go, but at least we're happy to see that here and there we're having some groups of people coming together to show that, just to see how similar my story was to you. That maybe my parents didn't want me to come to college either. Maybe that I'm working 2 jobs to be able to afford tuition, or maybe that I'm the first one in my family to go to school, and all that just to feel like, hey, this is part of our Latinx community, how we can make sure that we're working together.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to offer, and especially seeing 2 much younger leaders in this panel. I think that part of the change that we're seeing now across South Carolina is the emerging groups that are starting to self-organize, that are moving from grassroots to really community mobilization. And for us, that's very exciting, right? I mean, the Hispanic Alliance was formed as a grassroots leader, as a grassroots network, but we never necessarily understood the power of systemic change until we really understood that, you can mobilize and feed people, or you can change systems that people never need to be fed. And we fully embrace that, and we believe in that. And that is work that is not as, the satisfactions don't come as often as it is as when you are organizing and seeing the work right there and you can touch it. But what I'll say is, I think that our next challenge as a Hispanic, as Hispanics in South Carolina, is to really step up our advocacy and ensure that we are respectfully, of course, but that we are coming to new tables and asking the difficult questions, very much like Ivan was saying at the beginning, but we need to come in a unified way. In Greenville County School District, there isn't one Hispanic principal. There is a person that is an associate principal, and he continues to be put in different positions and different roles, and new people keep are coming and taking on that position, even though some of the schools where he has been serving are majority Hispanic now. And I think that we as a community have to find our voice and the courage to challenge that, and to challenge, our superintendent, and to challenge the school boards in our districts. That is so important. And I do believe that we're at an inflection point, but we also have a moment of opportunity that we cannot miss. I mean, part of the reason for the Student Dreamers Alliance is for sure accelerating access to college. But the core of that program is to open our students' eyes to the possibility of them being the decision makers for their own future. When you shift our students thinking from I'm a victim of the system to I'm actually going to be the next leader of this system, everything changes. And that's incredibly profound for a student who may be an immigrant or maybe the son or daughter of immigrants, to get to think that way and to really elevate their thinking to that level of I can be the next governor of South Carolina. I could be the next, principal. I could be the next superintendent. So I will encourage us and you to really be thinking about that next step that we need to take and really organize and really unify behind those big ideals. Because I think that when you put together grassroots with systems change thinking, that is the sweet spot, and that is where change actually happens.
Mm-hmm. Eileen, as someone who has done organizing with DACA United, you've been on college campuses, you yourself, of course, graduate of Columbia College. What thoughts do you have about what you've seen on college campuses, maybe what you experienced as helpful and supportive at Columbia College, things that you think should be replicated or expanded? And while you pull your thoughts together for that question, I just want to point out that there are some folks who are posting questions, Q&A, and keep those coming. We're logging them, and we'll circle back to them in just a little bit. Okay, Eileen, what do you think?
So I definitely think, as Yvonne mentioned earlier, that the sense of belonging is really important. For example, in high school, I never felt like I had the support. The Hispanic population in my high school was very small. And I always longed for like at least a few people that were interested in the same issues as I was, but I was just always too scared to ask, or to even ask like my guidance counselor about, hey, what does it mean? She would basically say like, oh, you have all these resources, but in the back of my head, I was like, well, actually, I don't because of my status, but I never felt comfortable or the support to ask. And then when I got to college, I'd heard about Estamos Unidas, which is a group organized at Columbia College by Latinx women. Well, now it's co-ed, so Latinx people. And I heard that Jackie Mayorga was actually one of the people, and Emmy and Juby were one of the girls that started that group. And I just felt like automatically, I just felt so excited that there was a group on campus for that, and that the semester I transferred in, it was inactive. And I didn't get involved with the group until my junior year. And it just felt really nice to be surrounded by group of people that understood me, had similar backgrounds as me, and were able to host a few events. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way, and all that got thrown out. But I would love to see that group at Columbia College come back, because it really does make a change. It makes a huge difference. It gives you like that confidence to speak up and just ask questions, speak your mind, speak up for what you believe in. And it was also my junior year of college that I met some of the people from LASSO at USC, and I went to 2 meetings. Gabriela invited me a few times, and it just the sense of community and just everybody coming together, and I felt like I belonged there. Even though I wasn't a student at USC, I felt like I belonged in that space. And same thing with other colleges, like Luku. I have a few friends that are part of that group in Clemson, and same thing. I feel like I belong there. Like I feel like I've known these people all my life, even though it's like I just walked into one meeting. So that's definitely a thing that I would love to see in high schools and middle schools, all educational institutions, is just groups coming together of people where we can create a safe space to be able to talk, not just about social issues, but also just about anything, because at the end of the day, like this type of work can be very mentally draining, and we also need that support system.
Ilse, on this topic of belonging and how schools and other institutions have helped create it, does that resonate with you? Has that been part of your experience where either you felt that there have been institutional supports, whether in undergrad or in other places where you've worked, that that recognize and value and create spaces of belonging for you as a professional and as a student?
Yeah, I think for me as a student at Clemson, I believe LUCU was just starting off when I started at Clemson, but I didn't really felt like I belonged at all. Back when I was there, there was even less amount of Latinx students. The experience is completely different, right? The way that we come at things, the way just everything is completely different. And I think that I was kind of robbed a little bit of like my university experience because I didn't feel like I belonged. And I'm so happy that now it seems like things are changing at Columbia College. I've heard so many great things about that group that Eileen was talking about, and you can just see the impact that it's had on so many women that were a part of that. And as far as professionally, I think, of course, there's room for a lot more improvement. I think where the reason that I am where I am at now is because I do feel like I belong, and I do feel accepted. I feel like I have that community that supports me and that understands where I'm coming from. And if there's ever any tension, I can come and kind of speak my mind, and they're willing to hear me out and kind of wrestle with those tough things that are difficult to talk about. In my experience as a caseworker, it was a lot more difficult. I would have loved to have continued doing that job because I was one of maybe 3 Latinx caseworkers, and I think it's such a big need for DSS workers to be out there with the community and for families to see people like us. But part of the issue there too was also just not feeling like you really belong, or that your work is really valued, even though you have the skill set and you're bilingual. And so yeah, there's always room for improvement, but I'm glad to see that South Carolina is slowly getting there.
There are 2 comments that I just want to point out. One person said that U of SC also just enacted the Alliance of Latinx and Black graduate students in the fall of 2021. which is a nod to the importance of this alliance building to strengthen power and position for different student groups. And the other point here that was made with is that we also have to push for culturally relevant teaching so that all students, including Latinx students, can see themselves in the material they are learning. And it must include many Latinx cultures and refrain from keeping it to a single story, which is actually makes me think of what Ivan said earlier about, it's actually, you didn't say this directly, but some of the critique of the way that actually dreamer advocates have heralded dreamers as being, kind of the best and brightest at essentially discounting the value of other people who maybe not be the valedictorian. It's sort of like, what kind of language do we use here that values and appreciates each individual for who or she is, whether she's a lawyer or a groundskeeper, right? And I wonder, Ivan, as you think about even the work that you do with Palmetto Luna, I wonder how you think about art and the work that you do to cultivate activists and artists across the state as a way to appreciate and recognize that diversity of the Latinx community.
Yeah, and what I say is like art is everywhere, and even this computer that I'm working or communicating with you guys was created by an artist or designed by an artist, and that's when we work with the Palmetto Luna Latinx artists, which we see ourselves mostly as a collective of Latino artists across the state. We have provided them with lots of opportunities to use their art for advocacy. And then we call that activism, when they're using art to impact society through that. And they love those opportunities. I can tell you most of the artists that we continue working throughout the years, and I can mention a few, they love because we give them that opportunity. Not only is an opportunity to create art, and also we've been paying our artists for the last 6-7 years, is that they are getting some money. And I'll tell you a story that Mike Young, that he told me, because we got him to, somebody wanted somebody to do spoken word at a meeting for Hispanic Heritage Month. And then he said, well, what you have to do, go in there, do your thing, do spoken word, we're gonna give you money. So he's like, wait. So I'm going to an event that I love just to be part of that. I'm gonna be a featured artist because I'm saying some of my poetry. Plus, you're gonna give me some money? It's like, yes. I said, like, yes, that's exactly what it is. But that's when you understand your art, your spoken word is very powerful and very needed in this moment. They are gonna understand that you have value on your art, but also the way that we were able to get them a spoken word person, which everybody's gonna say like, well, we don't really have poets in South Carolina. Of course we have Latino poets. Of course we have painters, and of course we have photographers and videographers. We have everything. And just providing the opportunity, again, is just making that connection. It happens a lot right now in Hispanic Heritage Month. I know my wife hates me because I get a phone call in the last minute, hey, we're having an event next week, and we were trying to get some art, can we get somebody? And then I was like, but then because I know I can make that connection, and all I have to do is like, hey, here is the phone number, call Avi Dueñas, and he's gonna do the exhibit, and we make it happen. But even though my wife is always telling me, you need to stop doing this because that's why you drive yourself crazy in Hispanic Heritage Month. But a lot of times it's just doing that, and that goes to your question, Ben. It's like, how do we make sure just providing them with opportunities? Because they love to do it, and that's what we say, hey, we're having an event in front of the State House. We want somebody to be painting live out in front of them. Do you want to do it? Yes, of course I want to do it. And it's just making them like the opportunity. Also, a lot of them that don't see themselves as an artist, just convincing them you have a talent, let's show that to somebody.
Believe it or not, we're almost out of time. And I'm wondering if a couple of you or all of you and I don't know how to say this without sounding like sappy or something, but what's like a message you want to send? I feel like you each started with such words of inspiration about how you think about leadership. So I almost want to go back to that moment. But what would you have us leave thinking about regarding this topic of the Latinx community and tomorrow's leaders in South Carolina?
okay, I guess I'll go first. And I say, please keep doing what you're doing, because you never know who you're gonna impact. And today I'm living very happy, even though I'm very tired. This month drives me crazy just to see these two very young, powerful Latinx women here. It's like that's what makes me happy. Just to continue helping and say, hey, you never know. You see, like I'm living inspired because I saw Eileen and Ilsia here. Of course, my carnala Adela is here too. But just when I see young people doing something for the community, that just fills my heart and that makes me work even harder.
Adela, what were you going to say?
It's very similar to what Ivan said. There's a reason we're friends. But I think it is, look around, and if you are on your own, bring others along with you. And I think you as young leaders, obviously you already share those values, and it's clear that you share a passion and a commitment to serve your community. And, you know, leadership is service. There is nothing more. If leadership is not service, then, you know, maybe it's not leadership. And you exemplify that. It makes me very proud. But model that behavior for the next generation. I think it's a chain, and all of us play a part in that. I think we will keep, I think it's a continuum, right? Our job as older, you know, Latinos in this state is to continue to open doors, and your job is to walk through those doors, develop yourself, focus on yourself, and when you can, just pull someone with you. But don't feel the weight of the war on you. It's about you right now, and your generation deserves opportunities. So focus on yourselves as well.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. Definitely, we are both very thankful for leaders like you all that have opened doors and led the way for us. And we're very encouraged by that and excited to open doors for others. And I wasn't planning on sharing this, but one of the reasons why I ended up at Clemson University was because a leader, a very good friend of mine now, Christy, we had met, we were helping students apply for college at Berea High School, and she asked me a few questions and was like, you know, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm at Greenville Tech, just doing some gen ed courses. And anyway, she looked at my grades and she was like, you need to transfer to Clemson, like, you need to do that right now. And she made me apply to Clemson that very day. And in my mind, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, this girl is like a little wild. There's no way that I'm going to get into Clemson. Like, I have good grades, but no es para tanto, right? But I applied, and in March, I got accepted to Clemson. So it just speaks to the importance of bringing someone else along. So that's, yeah, so important to keep bringing others along. And you never know the message that you have for someone else. You never know what that's going to lead to and how that's going to change their lives.
Just a combination of everything that everybody said. First of all, don't give up, keep going. I know it's very hard sometimes, but the smallest things can inspire so many people that are watching you. Just with like my job, for example, I'm a paralegal right now. And the other day, a client came in with her daughter, and obviously I'm the only one that speaks Spanish in the office, so I'm doing the interpreting. And after the end of our meeting, her daughter came up to me and was like, I want to be just like you when I grow up. And it just like touched my heart, because I was like, I'm just interpreting, like, that's it. That's it. But her mom told me, she's like, no, she's very impressed by you, just the way, like, you, like, I guess the way I was interpreting, I don't know, but it's the smallest things that are worth it. And like everybody else said, whenever you can, bring somebody in, because people have brought me in, and I've been able to reach many of my goals, and I've been able to bring in a lot of people and help them out. And that's just, whenever you can, bring somebody in, and don't give up, chase your dreams, chase your goals.
Adela kicked us off by saying that resources follow good work, and you guys do really good work and deserve to have many resources follow you. And I would also say that in light of what you've just said, I think people are drawn to good work, good art. They're drawn to service, people who come at this with a genuine and sincere commitment to change. Thank you so much for being an example to me and the people on this call and the people in your families and communities. It's good to be your neighbor. Thanks to each of you. I'm really grateful for your time.
And thank you for being a good ally. You are a great ally to the Hispanic community, so thank you for that.
And to folks who are on the call, we're glad that you joined us, and would just direct you to the flyer where you can find some information about each of these individuals, or key information that you can Google and find out more about Hispanic Alliance and the work that Ivan's doing across the state in many hats. And that Ilse and Eileen, man, keep it up, and let us know how we can continue to support. So thanks to everybody. We're really glad that you could join us tonight, and hope that we can come back and do this again at some point soon. Good night, everybody. So